Hello, my name is Christina Holt. My pronouns are she, her, and I am joining you from the University of Kansas Center for Community Health and Development, where I have the honor of supporting the evaluation and technical assistance for the Kansas-based RPE recipients.
Hello, and I'm Belinda Flores, she, her pronouns. I serve as the Sexual Violence Prevention Education Program Manager at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. So I oversee primary prevention of sexual violence in Kansas and support our RPE recipients. As we are focusing on community and societal levels of the CDC's social ecological model framework for prevention to guide our RPE community coalition efforts, housing has emerged as a top risk and protective factor for experiencing sexual violence affecting at least two of our grantee communities.
And we know that housing insecurity is a risk factor for experiencing sexual violence. A 2016 article published by the National Institutes of Health found that among a nationally representative sample, contact sexual violence is approximately 3 times as likely among those who had experienced recent housing insecurity within the last 12 months.
Primary prevention takes place before the violence initially occurs. So we are looking at strategies designed to reduce the factors that put people at risk for violence or encourage the factors that protect from violence.
Dr. Allison Arwitty, who is the director of the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control at the CDC, said sexual violence is a whole of society problem that requires a whole of society response, and that the social determinants of health are at the heart of public health. Some of the strongest evidence that we have for what works is truly going upstream. The social determinants are the non-medical factors that influence our outcomes. They are the conditions in which we are born, grow, live, work, and age, and the wider set of forces and systems shaping the conditions of our daily lives. These forces include economic policies and systems, development agendas, social norms, and policies and political systems. And in Douglas County, our local community assessments have been showing that housing insecurity is a priority local issue. Our local sexual violence prevention coalition efforts are led by the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center in Live Well Douglas County.
In the Douglas County Community Assessment, it became clear that a primary risk factor for sexual violence was severe housing cost burden. This was much higher in Douglas County than the rate of Kansas overall. And despite efforts to grow affordable housing, some people who had housing vouchers remained houseless because landlords refused to rent to them. The coalition then organized to research and educate about what other communities had done to address this issue. And after advocacy and community conversations, ultimately the group was thrilled that Lawrence City Commission voted to expand protections against discrimination on the basis of a person's source of income, immigration status, and protections for survivors of sexual and domestic violence, human trafficking, and stalking. The next step was to engage tenants in surveys to learn more about challenges and to learn from those most directly impacted to share their experiences and ideas in their own words. The goal of this was that the community could improve future efforts to ensure that the community is affordable, safe, and welcoming to all. And here is some data to give you an idea of what housing is like in Douglas County. So nearly half of homes in Douglas County are renter occupied, and approximately half of renters are cost burdened. So they are paying a third or more of their income towards rent. And 35% are severely cost burdened, meaning rent is more than 50% of their income. Additionally, our housing choice voucher has a wait list of about 1.5 to 2 years.
The survey sought information on residents' demographics, their housing basics, their experiences finding housing, their housing quality, housing conditions and maintenance, accessibility, their current living situations, rental payment methods, their risk for displacement, their application processes, lease non-renewals and evictions, safety, and ideas that they have for improving housing conditions in Douglas County. The group was really intentional about reaching out to community members who might be experiencing housing instability in order to best inform efforts to improve housing for all in the county, and worked with a number of community partners very closely in outreach. Online as well as paper copies of the survey were distributed, as were handouts with a QR code to the survey. Many community partners helped with distributing the survey to those who may be experiencing barriers to safe and affordable housing. And we were thrilled that 1,051 surveys were turned in that were reflective of the diversity of our community.
So, to share a few highlights from the survey with you, it took applicants an average of 3 months and 5 rental applications to secure a rental. In the survey, from those of the 1,051 respondents who responded, 67 of those respondents reported rent increases, and of those, 22% reported an increase of $200 or more. Residents reported difficulties posed by increasing rent and shared making hard choices such as whether to pay for food or rent. Residents reported many barriers to obtaining or renewing leases, which included credit and financial history, source of income, rental history, employment history, criminal history. Additionally, many residents reported being negatively affected by excess fees and having security deposits withheld.
And a total of 86 people who responded to the survey reported that they had received an eviction notice during their time as renters in the county. And of these, the vast majority, 94%, did not have any legal representation during the eviction process. Evictions resulted in a loss of housing for 62% of those impacted, and 20 of those who lost housing became homeless.
Additionally, of those surveyed, almost half of felt unsafe in their rental home, and nearly two-thirds reported that there had been times when they had submitted a maintenance request and it was not resolved. 337 respondents reported that they had chosen to not submit a maintenance request for fear of retaliation from the property manager.
So those are a few highlights from the surveys. We realize that tenant protections that are passed in the forms of laws and policies are so critically essential as tools for protecting tenants against rising rental costs, discriminatory and arbitrary eviction processes, and other threats to their housing stability and overall well-being. Policy options were researched and shared at local public meetings with the local Affordable Housing Advisory Board and upon request with the local city commission. And now some of these options have been prioritized and are being pursued by the local Sexual Violence Prevention Coalition. This group has prioritized top strategies, which they're wanting to start with a tenant bill of rights ordinance and education. And this would be a foundational step for some additional next steps. So once that tenant bill of rights is in place, they felt like that would pave the way for some additional policy options, including additional supportive housing for women who experience disproportionate housing barriers and homelessness in the community, implementing a healthy homes rental inspection program, partnering with our local shelter to identify policy and practice changes for primary prevention of sexual violence, eviction record and ceiling expungement, gender inclusive housing advocacy, a tenant opportunity to purchase ordinance, tenant right to counsel, junk fees prohibition ordinance, a just cause eviction ordinance, and also pursuing a technical assistance opportunity that's currently available, Solutions Sprint Unlocked, for opening the door to housing access through tenant screening protections. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you a bit about our work. We look forward to visiting with you in June. And in the meantime, we're sharing our contact information with you in case you are interested in being in touch. Thank you so much, and best wishes with your own sexual violence prevention efforts.